Thanksgiving week. It's my pleasure to welcome all of you and to welcome Dr. and Professor and former President Moncef Marzouki to Washington. He has been a visiting senior fellow at the Harvard School of Government in Cambridge, and it's really a pleasure to welcome him today to this event. Former President Marzouki does not need an introduction for those of you who know Tunisia and who have been following Tunisia closely, but we also have viewers on C-SPAN today and also on Zoom who might not know Tunisia very well. So I'm going to take a few minutes to introduce Dr. Marzouki. He has been one of the most prominent fighters and advocates for democracy and human rights, not only in Tunisia, but in the entire Arab world for the last 50 years. He was a founder of the Tunisian Human Rights League in the 70s, I think, in 71, 72, something like that. One of the founders. And he became president of the Tunisian Human Rights League. He has been active since then for 50 years on defending human rights in Tunisia and across the MENA region. He was the founder and the president of the Congress for the Republic Party, one of the main parties in Tunisia before the revolution, who fought against Ben Ali regime for over a decade or maybe 15 years or so. And then after the Arab Spring or the revolution of 2011, Professor Marzouki was elected as the first democratically elected president of Tunisia, and he served as president between 2012, from 2012 until 2014. So for 3 years he was the president of Tunisia, 3 very difficult years because those are the first years of the democratic transition in which Tunisia worked very hard to come together and to write the first constitution, the first democratic constitution in Tunisia and in the Arab world. He led a coalition of the first of its kind in the Arab world between Islamic parties and secular parties. It was really a novel idea to have secular parties and Islamic or religious-based parties such as Nahda working together for the success of the democratic transition in Tunisia. And for 3 years he was part of this coalition and he was the president of the country. And really it was the 3 years that were great in terms of achieving the democratic aspirations of the revolution and the democratic aspirations of the Tunisian people. But of course, you know that after that, things started to deteriorate until we had, economically speaking, especially, the economy did not really take off. There was no significant improvement in the economy. And then we had the pandemic in 2019 until last year, basically, which really were very painful on the Tunisian democracy and the Tunisian economy. And that's when the coup happened in July of 25 of July 2021. Elected President Qais Said took the opportunity to basically destroy the democratic transition, to close down the parliament, the elected parliament, to suspend the constitution. And he claimed in the beginning that it was just corrective measures and temporary measures, that the parliament would reopen in a month or two. He said in his first speeches, just, it will be a month or maybe 2 months. But of course we know that was a lie, and still the parliament is still closed until today. In fact, the majority of the members of parliament are being pursued and tried because they met last March virtually, and they declared that all the decisions of Qais Said are unconstitutional and therefore illegal and unlawful. So after that, about 120, everyone who attended that meeting online was accused of treason because they declared that his actions were illegal and unconstitutional. Anyway, Professor Marzouki was one of the first people after the coup to oppose the coup and to take a very clear stand, very principled stand against the coup, and he said this is illegal, this is unacceptable, and he spoke up against the coup very strongly, very firmly. I have tremendous respect for Professor Marzouki, for former President Marzouki, because he's a man of principle and he always stood on his principles and never deviated from his principles, no matter what the cost is. Whatever his principles tell him to do, that's where Professor Marzouki and Dr. Marzouki and former President Marzouki will always be, on the side of democracy, on the side of human rights, on the side of freedom for Tunisia and for the entire Arab region. So it's a pleasure to welcome him on behalf of CSID and the Washington Center for Yemeni Studies. We are organizing this meeting, and we have about 100 people joining us on Zoom. So we'll be happy to take questions after Professor Marzouki speaks. I'd like to give the opportunity to a representative from the Yemeni Center to say a few welcoming words.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Peace be upon you all. And in the light of the World Cup, hala bikum irhubu. We would like to congratulate our neighbors in Saudi Arabia for their, the news lines, the headlines are calling a major upset for winning against Argentina 2-1. And we would like to wish the best of luck to Nusur Qartaj, the Eagles of Carthage, who will be facing Denmark in a few hours. They're playing right now, actually.
They finished 0-0.
Better luck next time. So I would like to welcome all of you on behalf of the Washington Center for Yemeni Studies and our president, Mr. Abdul Samad Al-Faqih, who is sitting in the back. The Washington Center for Yemeni Studies is a DC-based research organization who sheds light, a wider and brighter light on the conflict in Yemen and aims to break down the complexities of the humanitarian crisis, the ongoing war, and the different social issues in Yemen by marrying data with decision-making. We provide simpler form. We break it down to the decision-makers who have taken, at times, very active roles when it comes to Yemen, but unfortunately have at times come from very misinformed, well-intentioned positions, so that we aim to fix that. So I come from Yemen. Contrary to common belief and redundant media headlines, I come from one of the richest countries in the Middle East. The jewel of Arabia, Arabia Felix, Al-Yemen As-Sa'id, from a land rich in history, in heritage, language, and culture. And as an avid reader of history, the former president of Tunisia, Moncef Al-Marzouki, will tell you as much. And it is very refreshing for somebody who participated in the Arab Spring, a youth, to say, former president. We don't hear that as much, and we don't get to see that often, so I'll keep saying it and keep repeating it throughout. So we are, besides that, we are also rich in natural resources, and we suffer from the resource curse in a very important geostrategic location that is unfortunately being held by a government that lacks sovereignty over the use of violence within its defined borders, which does more harm than good. As a participant in the Arab Youth Revolution in 2011 that took down a dictator who ruled for 33 years, Ali Abdullah Saleh, we had one of the most successful revolutions in the Arab Spring. We are a population that was at the time 25 million. Now, ironically, despite the war, we're at 30 million. Our population increased despite the war. And we had the same president for 33 years. Second to the United States, we are the highest gun per capita holders in the world. Every household has some kind of arms.
More than the U.S.?
We're the second guns per capita after the United States, and we still decided to go the peaceful route. even after the Friday of Dignity, Jum'at al-Karama, when the President Saleh unleashed his forces and killed 53 innocent, unarmed civilians, we still called out in the streets, Salmiya, Salmiya. After an attempted assassination of the President through the GCC initiative, he handed his power to his former Vice President, Abdurrabbu Mansour Hadi, who was supposed to be in for a transitional period of 2 years, and then we would hold elections. We also had an exemplary event known as the National... I always freeze when I translate it, because I tried to translate it from Arabic. I think in Arabic and translate it to English. الحوار الوطني, the National Dialogue Conference. I apologize. The National Dialogue Conference, where we brought representatives of all the Yemeni factions. We addressed the major discrepancies in all the issues that we had, starting from the separatist issue with the war that ensued in 1994, to the Houthis insurgents and their grievances against the Saleh regime. The Saleh regime then, while the national dialogue was ongoing, allied himself with the Houthi rebel group, who ironically had 6 insurgency wars against his regime between 2004 and 2010. Ali Abdullah Saleh is somebody who likened ruling Yemen to dancing and the heads of snakes. And he did that very masterfully until December 2nd, 2017, when his former enemies, now allies, the Houthis, he came out in December 2nd saying, I would like to open a new chapter with Saudi Arabia and the Saudi-led coalition, and we could unify ourselves against the Houthis. He made these remarks and these statements from Sana'a, from their stronghold. 2 days later, on December 4th, he was assassinated by none other than his former enemies and now allies. In between that, what happened in 2015 is that the Houthi group put the president and his cabinet under house arrest, and he fled to Saudi Arabia, and he called for the Saudi-led coalition to intervene and to restore him into power. And we have seen, unfortunately, a disastrous and not very well-planned intervention in Yemen that has led us to where we are today. I'm a huge fan of Marzouki's work, and I follow his, especially his breakdown of the levels of struggles. He breaks it down to 3 periods of time in history: the struggle against slavery, the second is the struggle against colonialism, and now the struggle for individual liberties within the states. And we know that every action has a counter reaction, and every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And no revolution has ever been saved or spared from a counter-revolution, which is what we're suffering from. But the fight is ongoing, and I always use the book, The Middle East Crisis Factory by Iyad al-Baghdadi and Ahmed Ghantash, who basically put in the frame of 30 years. They set a period of time for the Arab Spring to materialize within 30 years, and we are still in the epitome of it. And it's still going. It's only going to get better from here. And we saw that with November 11th, there was a potential revolution in Egypt that everybody was looking forward to. But even though that did not materialize on the ground, it definitely broke the barrier of fear that was the main obstacle. And Mr. Marzouki will dive deeper into it, and we will look forward to your questions. Thank you so much.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know that it's probably not the most appropriate time for somebody to come to Washington, but this is what was decided by my friend. Thank you, Dr. Radwan. Thank to the Yemeni friends. And thank you, all of us, to be here. I know you know a lot about what's happening in Tunisia and in the Arab world, so I will be as brief as possible so we can have a discussion, because fortunately we are a small group, so we can have a discussion. And I really am interested in knowing exactly what's your opinion, what's your reflection. I am very interested in sharing our common thoughts more than giving you my narrative, because I think a lot of you know exactly what is my narrative. So for a political actor, because I am still a political actor, I am still involved in politics, I am still fighting for a democratic state in Tunisia. I'm in this field for more than 5 decades, imagine, but I'm still decided, to go on and to never give up, even if we have had this black slide in the last 10 years. The battle for freedom, for having a democratic state, is a matter of generation. It's not a matter of, it takes generation and generation. It's my honor to be just a link, between the fight of my father and our father and grandfather, against colonialism, and to be the link, the fight is still going on, and be sure that I'm not going to give up. So, for a political actor, 3 questions for the moment now. For the moment, 3 questions: what to fear, what to expect, and what to do. What to fear, what to expect, what to do. To respond to this question, we must have a clear idea about what happened and why did it fail, why did it fail? Because if you don't have a clear opinion, image, or a framework of what happened and why it failed, I think we cannot respond to the question what to fear, what to expect, and what to do. Let me give you the 5 points of my narrative, the way I see what happened and why did it fail. Because it failed, yes, sure, but I always say that the Arab Spring is the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. So it's not accurate to talk about failure if we are just in the beginning of the process. 5 points, to resume my narrative. First, our people, the Arab people, mainly in Yemen, in Syria, and in Libya, and also in Tunisia and in Egypt, we are victims of what I call the double crime of the ruling elites. Our people are once again victims of a double crime committed by this ruling elite. The first crime is that because of their incompetence economically, because of their corruption morally, because of the repression politically, they have pushed our people to revolt. The revolution is the main responsibility of this ruling elite. So this is where the first crime, pushing the people, because they have refused everything, every kind of reform, they have pushed the people, our people, to revolt. The second crime is that they have organized everything, to block, to sabotage what was, and I hope still a peaceful and democratic revolution. They had done everything. This is why I'm talking about crime. Look what the situation in Yemen. Look at the situation in Syria. Look at the situation in Libya. Look at the situation everywhere. It is a crime because you have millions of refugees, millions of Syrian refugees, millions of people starving in Yemen, millions of people, This is why I don't like, the image of Arab Spring. For me, it's completely ridiculous to talk about Arab Spring, because when you think spring, once again, you think beautiful times and beautiful birds singing, etc. While, in fact, it was what happened to our people is a real catastrophe. And this catastrophe, I think, once again, is the responsibility of this ruling elite, because they pushed our people to the bush, and then they done everything, every crime, to stop it. So we have been victims of our elite, our political elite. Second point is we are victim also. I don't like very much the concept of victim, because it's a battle, it's a fight. So. But I would put victims, and I can say that we have been victims, once again, of the most brutal and the most corrupt dictatorship in the region. The Saudi, the Emiratis, the Iranian, they have done everything to interfere in our. This is why I don't think that democracy is no longer a domestic issue. Democracy, promoting democracy everywhere, now is a regional and international issue. And this is, I think, we didn't realize in Tunisia in the beginning of the revolution that we will be in the center of something we couldn't expect, we couldn't imagine. I have always said that Tunisia is, because it's a small country, because Tunisia is far from the Middle East, because we don't have oil, etc., etc., we're going to have our, to mind our own business, and nobody would be interested in us. In fact, it was a complete error, because I was surprised to see that the wave of the Tunisian revolution reaching Libya, Egypt, and Angola, etc., etc. So, because the Tunisian revolution was, threat, a serious threat to a lot of political regime, I think we have been victims of the intervention of this dictatorship, and they destroyed our country. Libya, Syria, and Yemen have destroyed, totally destroyed by the foreign intervention. So talking about the fact, like, Arab Spring has failed because Arabs are not worthy of democracy, etc. Bullshit. It's not that. It's because mainly of the intervention of this dictatorship. And here I come to the external factor to say that, unfortunately, we saw that the dictatorship did everything to sabotage the democratization process. Unfortunately, this is what I'm repeating all the time. Unfortunately, we saw that the democracy, the Western democracy, did almost nothing to support us. And this is also, we have to take this, to remember this when we try to respond to the question what to do. So first, we have been victims of the elite, the so-called elite. We have been victims of the intervention of the dictatorship because they are afraid of the Tunisian revolution, afraid of what could happen, what could be the contagion. And I think they're right. Look what's happening in Iran now. What's happening in Iran is exactly the continuation of the wave started in Tunisia 10 years ago, 11 years ago. But let me add an important point to the fact that the Western democracy didn't support our revolution. I think they are going to pay the high price for this mistake, because it's not only a moral mistake, but also a political mistake. Because what's happened, if you have the situation, if the situation would, would worsen day after day, you will have more and more instability, political instability, more and more repression, more, etc. Well, that means that we will have a flow of refugees going to Europe, flow of refugees going to the United States, etc. And this will be probably the most important factor to strengthen the far right in Europe. This is why in Europe now you have the comeback of the far right in Italy, in Sweden, in Denmark, of course, in Poland and in Hungary. And you know that the far right is anti-democratic everywhere. So because the Western democracy are not helping us, to promote our democracy, maybe they are also undermining their own democracy. And this has to be, I think here in the United States, you have to remind the political actor that, look, because you are not, democracy is now a fight everywhere, and it's not an international, regional, international fight. So if democracy is defeated in the Arab world, it will be defeated here. This is probably the most important lesson I think that should be drawn from what happened in this our region. And the second, beside the external factor, the Arab Spring also failed because of internal factors. Yes, of course, mainly the division between Islamists and secularists. And I'm afraid this divide between secularists and Islamists is not, I've tried my best during 10 years to bridge this gap between Islamists and secularists, but I'm afraid that didn't work, and I'm afraid that this bridge is not going to, it's broken now. It's broken, and I'm afraid that the gap would be larger and larger, and I'm afraid, and I can say, I'll be frank with you, because of the mistakes made by the Islamist party, mainly in Tunisia, accepting to deal with the counter-revolution, there is no more faith, there is no more, I think that there's something broken between the Islamists and the secularists like me, and this would probably be one of the reasons that the process would be much more difficult than before. And then I will end with the fact that, okay, we have lost the battle, the counter-revolution has won, but now the situation is very, very, I wouldn't say very ridiculous, because yes, the revolution failed, but also the counter-revolution failed also. When you look at the situation in Egypt, when you look at the situation in Tunisia, you see that, of course, the counter-revolution has done everything, you know, so that so we don't succeed. And they succeeded in making us not succeed. But the counterpart, you have the total failure, the total bankruptcy of the counter-revolution. Look at the situation in Tunisia. Look at the situation in Egypt. I'm not talking about the situation in Yemen and in Syria and Libya, because it's a caricature of a failure. It's something terrible. And what's makes me a little bit optimistic is the fact that for the people now, for the Tunisian people, they saw the two kinds of alternative to democracy. In Egypt, the alternative to democracy, because it was the alternative, is the dictatorship, a harsh dictatorship, much more corrupt and much more violent than the dictatorship before the revolution. So the Egyptian people now are watching what it means exactly to lose a revolution, a transition. And in Tunisia, Tunisian people are watching every day what does it mean to have a populist regime, because, you know, the alternative to democracy in Tunisia was populism, and the alternative to democracy in Egypt was harsher dictatorship than before. So this is the situation now. What to fear? You know, in 2010, nobody was expecting what's going to happen in Tunisia. I remember that in 2006, I went on Al Jazeera program, and I addressed it to the Tunisian people, telling the Tunisian people, now it's time to take to the street. It's time, to get rid of this corrupt dictatorship, etc. And decided at the time, I decided to go back to Tunisia, because I said I cannot appeal to the Tunisian people to take the streets while I'm in Paris. So I decided to go back. I went to Tunisia in 2006. Nobody moved. Nobody, nothing happened, and I was obliged to leave once again Tunisia. And I thought at that time, maybe I am not going to see any kind of revolution on my lifetime. In fact, 4 or 5 years after, then you have the volcano, the eruption of the volcano. Last week, 11/11, the Egyptian revolution called the Egyptian people to take to the street. And I joined this appeal. I went on television, network, saying, hey, you Egyptian people, Tunisian people, take to the street, it's time to get rid, etc. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Nobody took to the street. And I understood that, in fact, you cannot, I told you that I don't like the image of Arab Spring. I prefer also to use the image of Arab volcanoes. And you know that the Arab volcano, you never know when the volcano would erupt. You just know that it would erupt, but you never know. And this is exactly what's the volcano have their own time, own rhythm, all time. You cannot order to a volcano, hey, volcano, could you please explode? He wouldn't listen to you. He listened its own regime, its own, its own pressure, etc. So what I am sure of is that we are going to have a new explosion. This is what I fear. When, I don't know. Nobody knows. What I fear most also that the next explosion would be much more violent than in the beginning of the so-called Arab Spring, because sure that we, in Tunisia, for instance, we just have 300 people dead, killed, just 2,000 people wounded. when we compare to the price paid by the Yemeni, the Syrian, and the Libyan, it's nothing. But of course, it was something. But I'm afraid that the next outburst, the next explosion of the volcanoes, the price would be higher and higher and higher everywhere. Why? Because now there is a lot of hatred and frustration among the population, among the youth, because they saw that they didn't get anything from the first revolution, and they are complaining that people like me and like Volcano, and we have tried, to be to reach this kind of consensus of all the regime, to talk about transitional justice, etc., etc. But for the new generation, I'm afraid that you forget about this, forget about all this. Those people, are criminals. They pushed us to revolution. They did everything, to stop us. Look what they. We are going to get rid of them. I'm afraid there is so much hatred now in the youth that I'm afraid that really we are going to have both. And the other side, the counter-revolution, they know that they are hated. They know that they have a lot of blood on their hands. And I'm sure that they are extremely scared, they're extremely afraid, and they would do everything, to stop any kind of revolution. This is exactly what's happening in Egypt, So what I fear most is that probably we can have a burst of violence, and this would be terrible because I'm afraid that Tunisia or Egypt could take the example, would have exactly the same fate that Yemen or Libya. And I see any kind of solution in Yemen or in Syria. Now I come to the other point: what to do. This is what I fear most. What to do. Normally, when you are a wise man or a wise person, you would say, I must avoid this kind of fate. We are fed up violence. The economic situation is worsening. The political situation is worsening. We are threatened by the climate change. You probably know that our region is really the region that is endangered by the climate change. So normally we would say we are really under. It would be a question of survival. So we had to reach a consensus. Let's talk with the government. Let's talk with the people now in charge to avoid this kind of fight. But can you imagine a Sisi talking to Ayman Noor? Can you imagine Qais Said talking with me? I don't think so. Unfortunately, I don't think so. Those people, are extremely scared. They are in their own narrative, in own ideology, and I'm afraid that there is no way to have this. What would be the best solution is to discuss, to find a kind of consensus about peaceful transition. But I'm not. I'm convinced that that would never happen. So, what else? What should be done? Could, for instance, the government here in the United States, in Europe, put a lot of pressure on, because the dictatorship are the client of the states, put the pressure on them, For instance, for the IMF loan, okay, we are going to give you the money, to get rid of, to solve some of your problems, but you have, to make some concession, some political concession. I'm not sure that also would be done. Look what's happening. What's happening? The two dictators are invited here in Washington in December for the African-American summit. And you remember that weeks ago we have had the summit of the Francophonie in Djerba, and no problem, 2 days ago. And no problem, the democratic leader of Canada, the democratic leader of France, the democratic leader of all countries, they went, no problem, to support the dictator that have closed the parliament, that is jailing a lot of journalists, etc. No problem. So once again here, I'm not sure that it would work. It would be business as usual. The Western government has always supported the dictatorship, and they will never stop doing this. They have their reason, and we have to accept it. So this is why I'm telling to my friend that we have to rely on ourselves and nothing else. Of course, we must do everything we can. We must try, but I don't think that something important would change. So what to do is, once again, to rely on ourselves, to resume the fight. To resume the fight, mainly it's, to try to, and this is what I am working for, and we are a lot of people working for, first to have, to consolidate a kind of democratic network within every state. And this is what we're working for in Tunisia. And because I had the Arab Council for the Democratic Revolution, we are also trying to build a network of democratic leaders of as many Arab countries possible, because we do know that we have to support ourselves, because otherwise if we face every democratic movement facing its dictatorship without a link with the other fighters in the other worlds, in the other parts of the Arab world, it's not a good solution, because we are fighting a common enemy, and the common enemy, they are working together. I can assure you that the dictatorship are working together, are linking all their efforts, to stop this wave of democratization. I think I'm going to stop here, because I would like to have your opinion, and also your insight, and maybe your help me to know what to do, because it's really a matter extremely complex, extremely difficult. I don't have a receipt. I don't know if somebody has a receipt, but all what I can assure you that we are going to fight. We never give up, and yes, we have a lot of reason to be pessimistic, but we have also a lot of reason to be optimistic. The reason to be optimistic, once again, is the fact that we have a new generation, what I call the E generation, and this E generation is committed to new values, and this new generation will never accept to be ruled as their grandfather was ruled by the regime of oppression of one man, one tribe, one group, etc., having for them the wealth, having the consideration, having for them the power, and leaving the rest of the population, in the misery, So we are going to fight. We are going to, the process is still going on. We have lost the battle, but I always say that we are going to win the war. You have talked about the main idea. I repeat everywhere to the people who are a little bit discouraged, or a little bit, they are tired very early. I always say, look, it took 3,000 years to get rid of slavery. It took 400 years to get rid of colonialism. It will probably take many decades to get rid of dictatorship. But be sure that we got rid of slavery, we got rid of colonialism. We are going to get rid of dictatorship. I repeat this because it's I would say not very funny, but I'm surprised to see young people, defeated very soon, because we have lost the battle, saying, oh, the Arab Spring is over, we have nothing to hope, etc., etc. So this is why I'm trying to let them think, consider the long term, not only the very short term. A decade is nothing in the history of a nation. It's nothing. It's just, like this. Tunisia is 3,000 years old. So 10 years is nothing. It's just a moment. This is why I repeat to the people, stick to our values, stick to our hope, and we will win. And my slogan is, we have just one choice, to win or to win. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, President Marzouki, for a sobering evaluation of the situation in Tunisia and in the Arab world. We're going to open the floor to your questions and comments, as well as to anybody who's with us on Zoom. He can also send us questions. But I'd like to start with one question that is very deep in my mind, is how do we rebuild unity between the opposition in Tunisia or in the Arab world, and how do we rebuild the trust between Islamists and secularists? We know that Ben Ali fell when the opposition became united. after the 18th of October movement, and after they met for several years and agreed on a platform and agreed on a vision for Tunisia, the people moved and Ben Ali ran away. So how can we get back to the unity of the opposition, despite their differences? I mean, they can't agree on everything. Obviously, there will still be disagreements on many things. But if they don't come together, I don't think that there is any hope. If they are not united, then the dictatorship will last a lot longer, and the price will be a lot heavier. So that's my question. Do you have any ideas, any suggestions on how we can overcome, the mistrust that exists today? تفضل. كما تحب.
Well, it's the problem everywhere. I know a lot about the Egyptian opposition, the Syrian opposition, the Yemeni opposition, and it's exactly the same problem everywhere. There is a lot of opinion, and I really think that hoping that we are reaching a kind of unity where you have a national front against dictatorship in Syria, etc. This is what we worked for more than 10 years, and we failed. We have to accept this. We failed. Why? Because behind the scene you have foreign actors. Behind the scene you have differences of opinion. We have different ambitions, etc., etc. So useless, to say, well, we will unite and then everything will be okay. We are not going to build a real front against dictatorship in Tunisia. What we can have is kind of, that Jabhat al-Khalas, what we call Jabhat al-Khalas, this the front. This is the most important political organization against dictatorship. You have another. You have my party, which is a secularist party. And you have another also secularist party, Qalb Tunis, and you have also a small Islamist group named Al-Karama. So this front we have two secularist party and two Islamist party. But at the same time, you have also all the secularist party, 5 secularist parties saying we are not going to do anything if another is in the game. Another has to give up, and another has to go away, to leave the political field. Otherwise, we are not going to do anything with you. And for me, it's not acceptable, because another is part of the political game. It has to be accepted, and exactly the same thing in Egypt. You cannot get rid of one part of the population. While I have a lot of reproach against another, I know that another, played an important role in this bad reputation it has for the moment. But you have to make the distinction between, a political position that you can have have discussion or how different point of view with another, and the other point which is, no, I'm not going to work with an Islamist group, whatever happened. But we are in this, in this contradiction, we're in this problem. I do hope that we're going to solve it, because of dictatorship, because dictatorship is harassing everybody, is repressing everybody, and maybe because, or I would say, thanks to the dictatorship, we will have this political front. But for the moment, it's a problem, and I don't have to lie to you. It's a difficult problem.
Okay. So we'll take 3 questions at a time. Dr. Marzouki, if you can write down the question. And please introduce yourself. We have a microphone. We'll start with, Khalil, and then Ricky, and then... Yeah.
Thank you very much, Radwan. Thank you, Dr. Marzouki. Thank you for your dedication and for your role over the last 50 years in fighting for democracy and human rights. Really appreciate that.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
Myself,
and can you stand up?
Okay.
Because we have...
My name is Khalil Anan. I'm a senior fellow at the Arab Center, Washington, D.C. So my question to you is, what happened to the Tunisian civil society?
To the
civil society in Tunisia. This civil society played a very important role in the uprising in Tunisia 2011, particularly Ittihad al-Aam lil-Shughul. I'm so disappointed in their position after the coup of Qais Said last year. They did almost nothing to stop the coup of Qais Said. And to some extent, I feel that they are with them, unfortunately, despite the fact they played a very important role against Ben Ali for 30 years. What happened to them? What is the Tunisian street? We don't see that resistance within the street against Qais Said.
Shara Tunsi.
Should I ask in Arabic? Maybe much.
No, it's okay. Just
Okay.
Yeah.
Shukran. Thank you.
thank you, Khalil. Ricky. Okay. Yeah.
Hi, Ricky Goldstein, Human Rights Watch. Following on the preceding question about civil society, I accept your analysis, Dr. Marzouki, as far as it goes, but you don't really talk about the role of the Tunisian people. And by that I mean, for 16 months now, President Said has been dismantling democracy. And there's been largely a demobilization of the people. There hasn't been mobilization to restore democratic institutions or widespread protests. And this is not the Egypt of Abdel Fattah Sisi. He did not round up 20,000 Muslim Brotherhood members. It's not a state of terror. Yes, there are violations. It's a scary situation, but it is not the terror of Egypt.
Yeah.
Why is it that it's easy to say it's the economy, but there's no magic solution for the economy. I think there's a greater danger or greater possibility of a military coup in Tunisia when Said fails than there is of a restoration of democracy. And it's not just a sterile question I'm asking, because I think it goes to why Western governments are not mobilizing to put pressure on Said, because there doesn't seem to be a surge of popular sentiment for democracy in Tunisia. And it's an excuse that Western governments are hiding behind. Thank you.
I understand.
How do you persuade people that a democratic solution is what's most needed when the economy has no signs of turning around quickly?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Dr. Ghassan Boudia from Democratia Center. Mr. President, we're so glad that you're safe here in the land of liberty, but we're very sad that the Tunisian people are facing what they're facing right now. I have like a couple of quick questions that can be easily answered. You said that you don't know President Said, you know that President Said will not talk to you at all. Like, can we know who does he talk to? Because like, usually it's known that he doesn't talk to anybody. This is number one.
Well, he talks to himself.
Well, I mean, Professor Marzouki might know something about that. Concerning what steps need to be undone of what President Said has did, like the constitution, the incoming elections. I don't know. Well, what should be undone? Number three, le sommet francophone. That was it the stage of salvation for Qais Said, and the same as President Sisi's summit in Sharm el-Sheikh, the climate summit? Was that the stage of salvation for these two guys, or it's just like a numbing, or what we say, an aesthetic needle? And then the volcano's eruption is coming. That's the question. And one last question. Why don't you work with civil society activists and, democratic parties actors like Abir Moussi and others in Tunisia? What bans this collaboration to create, a certain coalition in order to let democracy rule? Thank you.
Thank you. If you can answer these three questions.
No, it's too much. تكثر عليه الأسئلة خليني أرد بعد كل مرة يرد على هذا. To react very quickly about Abir Moussi. Abir Moussi and all this kind of people, they just want Abir Moussi and all this kind of people, they were just one thing, to come back to the previous situation of to have their own dictatorship. So how can you deal with people, their objective is, to go back to the system, to the same political system that the Tunisian people revolt against. What about the salvation? I think it's for Sisi, like for Qais Said, they hope that this kind of summit would help them to restore their image internationally, etc., etc. But in fact, the fate would be mainly the responsibility of the people. So I don't think that this would be any help to solve the social and economic problem they are struggling against. So I don't think really that is extremely important or that matter for the people. For the question about do we know that about Qais Said? Qais Said is the man unable to talk to anybody than himself, you know. So he wrote the constitution himself, you know. Even the people working with him resigned. He decided everything. He's really the kind of guy that thinking that but this is the ideology of the populist, of the populists. For the populists, what's happened is you have the leader, and the inspired leaders, something like a prophet, and then you have the people. And in between, you cannot rely on any kind of set of rule or institution, etc. This the relationship between the people. It's something. It's a magical way of thinking. You know, it's a very old, primitive way of thinking. This is what's the main characteristic of the populism ideology. The leader is a kind of prophet. And this is why I think you have to be a little bit crazy. And I think really he's insane. It's my deep conviction as a doctor that he has a kind of psychosis. This is my, you know, I never use this kind of term against Belgica, Sipsi, or against any kind of, or Ben Ali. But I deeply believe, and this is why I'm extremely upset for my country, that to be led by somebody who's insane. He really believed that he's a kind of prophet, you know. And here the people, 10% of the Tunisian people, you know, voted for the last. But he's still talking about the people. That he's the people. He's the soul of the people, and the people has to be led by a kind of leader. It's completely crazy, and this is why it's much more dangerous for us probably than in dangerous and maybe more fragile than in the Sisi, because Sisi, even a Sisi, you know, he's not insane. He's stupid. He's as you want, as you. But he knows exactly what he's doing. This guy is completely out of this. So he's not going to talk to anybody, and this is why I don't expect any kind of political solution with him until there is a coup, a military coup, and that's I am afraid of, or there is, you know, kind of chaos in the country, and this also is not something that we wish. So about the civil society, both you have asked about civil society. Tunisia used to have, you know, why Tunisia didn't know the fate of Yemen, of Syria, and of, you know, of Libya. It's not because we are smarter or most peaceful people, etc. It's because the very structure of our society, we are a homogeneous society, middle-class society, Westernized society, etc. And we used to have a very strong civil society, NGOs under the dictatorship, which was the case in Libya, for instance, where they didn't have at all a civil society movement. So we used to have a very strong civil society movement. I was part of this civil society movement before, you know, going in politics. And I know that the civil society played an important role. Human rights leagues, you know, women NGOs, Democratic, etc. It was a huge movement. It was very important. But for the moment, now currently, I'm afraid to say that we are, of course, we still have an important and strong NGOs working in the field, but we also have a lot of corrupt, you know, because after the revolution, the democracy led was the occasion for everybody, you know, to build any kind of political party, everybody to have an NGOs, etc. So we have had a lot of corrupt NGOs organization, and we are suffering for the moment from those NGOs. I'll give you just one example. You have a lot of NGOs who have supported the coup, and all these NGOs mainly are supposed to support democracy, but they didn't support democracy. They support the coup, and A lot of those NGOs are funded by NED or I don't know, many other, yes, funded by, So imagine you are funding NGOs to promote democracy, and then suddenly you discover that those NGOs are supporting the coup. This is a problem, and this is probably here in Washington. You have to, to take this in account and to review all your policy about supporting any kind of NGOs. Just saying, look, I am working in this, in the field of civil society, etc. Unfortunately, we have in Tunisia a lot of corruption in media, political parties, and civil society. Corruption is everywhere. This is why I think it's very important for us now to tackle this problem, because it is the problem everywhere. It used to be the problem of the government, of the dictatorship. For the moment, it's the problem of the state, the civil society, the political parties. And this is why the transition is a little bit complex, because the people supposed to be leading the transition are themselves, I'm not sure that they are real Democrats. What was it, the last?
Where is the street?
Yes, where is the street? Look, I'm sorry to know that when we talk about the revolution in 2011, we say that the Egyptian people. No, it was not the Egyptian people. It was 100,000 people, who were in the Tahrir Square and who participated to the revolution. It's exactly the same thing in Tunisia. No, it was not the whole Tunisian people. It was just part, tiny part of the Tunisian people who took to the street. So expecting that now you should have all the Tunisian people, taking to the street to protest against the dictator. I think it's a myth. But consider what happened during the last 12 months in Tunisia. You would see that you have a lot of demonstration, a lot of rallies, many of them, and sometimes with 10,000 people, which is extremely important in Tunisia. So in fact, the Tunisian people reacted against the coup, and we are still reacting. We are still working on it. So saying that the Tunisian people is accepting the dictatorship, maybe that was true in the very, very beginning. One of the reasons is that really the Tunisian people was hating, the Nahda, were hating the parliament because of the bad image the parliament gave, etc., etc. So the people felt relieved, and they thought that something else would be that situation, their economic situation would improve, the political situation of the country would improve, etc. And what they are saying, this is what I told you, that fortunately the Tunisians are watching very carefully what's the kind of alternative they have to the democratic system. Of course, the democratic system with a lot of mistakes, etc., etc. But now they can compare between the democratic system, even if it was, with all its problem, all the difficulty, and then they compare what's the reality of a populist state. They see the difference, and this is why I do believe that something is, changing in the mind and hearts of the population, and this maybe would help us, to have a new opportunity to build a democracy, a real democracy. But then we will have the responsibility, to build a real democracy, to tackle the real problem of the corruption within the political party, the corruption within the civil society, the electoral code, etc., the corruption in the media. Because if we do not tackle all this problem, we are going once again to have a new failure.
So we'll take 3 more questions. Mohamed, Anwar, and we'll take one in the back there. Father Mohamed.
He's coming with the mic.
Okay. We'll start here. Yeah, Mohamed.
Mohamed Al-Shinlawi, senior analyst at the Voice of America. Across the Arab Spring countries, economy is the top priority for the ordinary citizen. Is the Arab population ready for democracy when average person is struggling to earn enough money or enough income to support his or her family? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Anwar.
Assalamu alaikum. Rais, Assalamu alaikum. My name is Anwar Hadam, elected member of Algeria Parliament 30 years ago, and still struggling for democracy in Algeria. Actually, I would like just a few seconds just to maybe we could be inspired by what is going on in Algeria that you didn't mention at all. As you know, we had about 2 years of what we call harak. It was 2 years, millions and millions around the country, not only in one city or two, who were, on the street, but they were peaceful, and they were civilized revolution, really. And that shows that the people are looking for the unity. I would like to go back. I don't want you to escape the first question. There is no way. The people are looking for unity among various ideological groups within the society. It's up to the elite to furnish an effort within the Islamists and within the secularists also. And we have Algeria as experiment, 30 years after the struggle that has been used by the military in order to topple the elections, and we experienced 30 years of, people they don't want to go back to there. So I think we need to struggle. We need to find a solution. We need to have a new national contract. عقد اجتماعي جديد. That's what I think.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yes, in the back over there.
Assalamu alaikum. First thing, I would like to thank Dr. Moncef Marzouki for coming here and enlightening us with this.
Can you introduce yourself, please?
And I'm Radwan Mazghani. I'm an undergraduate student at the University of Maryland, College Park.
From Tunisia.
From Sfax. The first thing I wanted to say is that in some way I feel like I represent at least a little bit the youth of Tunisia. I feel like there's definitely some disaffection with the democratic process. Just some facts. Between 2014 and 2019, which is the time after the constitution until the time of Qais Said, Tunisia actually had GDP decline. So the first thing is that this process had adverse impacts on the economic status of the Tunisian people. And obviously we know that GDP is oftentimes a good marker on the general wealth of the population. The second thing is that we've seen that in the current political parties, in the current political landscape, especially the parties that make up Jabhat al-Khalas, we find that they were not maybe so true to their values. For example, the parties failed to retrieve the money that was stolen by the Ben Ali and their family abroad. Second thing, we saw Qanun al-Tasalih al-Idari in 2000, that was head by al-Bajiqa al-Sibsi, but also Ennahda was in power. The third, probably biggest event was the fact that the Ennahda government took down the government, or Ennahda took down the government of Ilyas al-Fakhfakh over accusations of اضطراب المصالح, تضارب المصالح, I don't know how to say this.
Conflict of interest.
Conflict of interest. But in the end, after that, decided to form a government with Qalb Tunis, whose leader, Nabil Qarwi, is known to be corrupt. He has a corruption case. So how do we go from here when we, as a Tunisian youth, have zero trust in the current parties that are in power, whether they be Islamist, secularists, or whatever? And how can we find that Jabhat al-Khalas and these kind of personalities that we've seen for the past 10 years, how can they form the real leadership and the real kind of opposition to the current dictatorship? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What about the first question, the question of economy? Of course, people took to the street for two major reasons everywhere, for political freedom and for social justice, mainly for social justice and improvement of their status, of the economic status. That was obvious. And I can say that for the first objective, we succeeded because Tunisia, under my presidency, was a free country. The people enjoyed their political freedom, the freedom of association, freedom of, etc., etc. I never sent any any journalist in prison, while for the moment, there are a lot of them in prison, etc. So I can say that the first objective, of the revolution has been achieved. The second was not. We didn't deliver. We didn't deliver for many reasons. The economy, we didn't deliver for many reasons. First, we have inherited a corrupt and inefficient and unjust economy. This is why people took to the street. So we inherited of this economy. This is the first question. The first reason we didn't deliver, and the second reason we didn't deliver the growth, etc. What people was expecting is the political instability. Because during the time I was president, I have three government, and then after me there are 3 other government, and for the moment Tunisia has about 10 government in 10 years. So political instability. You know that when you have political instability, you cannot have economic growth. Foreign investor, internal investor, etc., would not be interested in investing, saying, hey, let's wait, then we will see what would happen, etc., etc. So we didn't deliver first because we have inherited of this economy. The second, because of the political instability. Third, because another side effect of the political instability, the fact that Tunisia is a tourist country. We used to have 5 million tourists every year. When you have this political instability, people would not come. So that means that you add to the jobless people, you add 200,000 people without jobs because of the crash of tourism. So there was a lot of, and the other reason, the fact that the deep state, did everything to block our reform. I can assure you that we made a lot of effort, to promote investment using the money of the state, to invest in the hinterland. But the hinterland, I have discovered that the government and a lot of people, were trying, to stop anything because this would benefit myself, for the benefits to the government, etc., etc. So we have a lot of reason, and then the other reason is that we have asked our Western friend, hey, our main problem is debt. Could you relieve us of debt? They said no. We said, look, we have a lot of money, in your bank stolen by the dictatorship. Can we recover it? They said no. We have to go to courts, etc., etc. So you have a lot of reasons that we couldn't deliver economically. And this is why the counter-revolution, come to power democratically in Tunisia, because they have used the fact that we didn't deliver. But now the counter-revolution is in charge of the country for more than 5 years, or even 6 years. They didn't deliver either. The economy is worsening day after day because corruption is back, because they are inefficient, because a lot of it, so they didn't deliver. So the population is now facing a situation where they have lost their freedoms and they didn't gain anything economically. This is the situation. This is why it's going to explode. This is why it's going to burst. So yes, of course, we didn't succeed for many reasons, internal reasons. Some of our main responsibility, some are not our main responsibility of the counter-revolution, the responsibility of foreign actors, etc., etc. We couldn't deliver. But once again, the counter-revolution did. Look at the situation in Egypt. You have the state is about on the verge of bankruptcy. So once again, because they didn't deliver economically, they took all the freedom brought by the revolution. You are going to have a new volcano. That's I am quite absolutely sure. Now, what was the other question? Yes, Algeria. Yeah, Algeria. Well, I didn't talk about Algeria because I have always a very difficult problem with the Algerian government and with Algeria. They were very scared. The Algerians were extremely scared about the Tunisian revolution. And I have a lot of meeting with Bouteflika at the time, all the leaders, Yahya, etc., etc. And I saw that they were very reluctant to talk with me. And I saw that they were very, not only because I'm supposed to be close to Morocco, which is not true, but they were very much afraid of the Tunisian revolution. And I think they were right. They were right, because the Hirak, what is the Hirak? The Iraq, like what happened in Iran now, it's something like the echo of what happened in Tunisia. And why is it the echo of what's happened in Tunisia? Because in all this country, you have the same problem. You have corrupt elite, brutal elite, governing people of not of citizens, but the people of subjects. And of course, they were afraid to see that the example of Tunisia could be an example for them. And they were right. The Iranians were right, to be scared, and the Algerian government were right to be scared. And what happened now in Iran and in the Iraq is exactly the same thing what happened. It failed in Algeria I think here, all Algeria is the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. And it's now, what's happening in Iran. The Iranian people is fighting, and I think the process is now ongoing, and it won't stop. So now you talk about the fact that we had to, to unite, etc. I totally agree with you. I'm working I wouldn't say 24/7, but I can assure you that I'm working on that. But you have to accept that the problem is not that easy. It takes time, and you are not probably going to have everybody on board. Maybe if you can have as many political actors as possible working together, that will be enough. But imagining that you will have everybody on board and united, etc., this is a myth. As political actor, I can assure you that will never reach. And maybe we can lose a lot of time and a lot of energy on trying to solve this problem. I prefer that my energy goes to to working on the field, rather than having hundreds of thousands of hours, talking with people who never accept to work with you.
The last question was about how can
yes.
the people have trust again in the political parties and in democracy.
Look, I want to be frank with you. I don't accept this kind of thing. You don't trust me. How would I trust you? What have you done for the country? This is what I always say to the Tunisian when I go, on the battlefield. You didn't do it. I said, look, I am not your servant. I am one citizen among you. You have to work with me. We have to work together. If you don't want to, I am not here at your service. I am just one like you, and we have to work together to solve the country. You don't have to talk to me as your servant. This mentality of consumer, they are waiting you to deliver. You have to bring them democracy. You have to bring them everything. You have to, and they have just to look at you and say, "I am going to trust you. I am not going to trust." No. Give me a reason now to trust the youth now living in the country because they are not able, to fight inside the country for their country. So, do you understand what I mean? It's not up to you to talk to me to say, give me the reason to trust you. Why should I give you any reason to trust me? I have been on the fight for more than 5 decades, and you, what have you done for your country? This is what I'm telling, frankly, to everybody, every young people talking this way. No, I'm not. I don't accept this way of talking. You have to talk me respectfully, and you have to accept that it's also your job to fight for the country. It's not only mine. And you must give me a reason to trust you. You must fight on the field so I can trust you. And then you can ask me, how can I trust you? Excuse me, but this is the way I am talking in Tunisia. It's not the way I'm talking to you now here in Washington.
We're out of time, but we're going to take maybe 2 or 3 very quick questions because Mr. Marzouki has another meeting, so we have to leave in about 5 minutes. Please, if you have an urgent question and a short question.
Well, in fact, no, I would like to have no question, comment. What do you advise me to do? Because I want to hear from you. As I know my narrative, but I want to look. What do you think about what's happening? What do you suggest me? What would you advise me?
Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, 1 minute each, please. Okay, shukran.
Munjid Dawadi, I'm the president of Tunisian United Network. It is a Tunisian organization, and I'm glad we have some new faces in here. So we hope that we can. I'm thinking about how to phrase my comment into a question, but then you said, give me a comment. My comment is that I think by you, for example, teaching here in the U.S., I think we have an opportunity maybe to create a dialogue. And through a dialogue where we can at least recommit ourselves to democracy, we can address the issue of trust. Yes, there is a broken trust, especially from the youth talking about different political parties, but I think even the US, even the establishment, even the big think tanks and NGOs, especially those who have offices in Tunisia, for years they invested in an elite, and they created a group of people that were not democratic. I mean, they spent millions of dollars spending on people that they thought that they are, building democratic institutions. Instead, they created what I call an unofficial lobby. They lobbied the US, they lobbied the European Union to save and keep Qais Said doing what he's doing while he's destroying democracy. I mean, you can go back and look at the Twitter accounts. You can go back and look at the articles that were written, the attacks on anybody who said Qais Said was, destroying democracy. They were attacking them. They were defending Qais Said. And all of them, I mean, almost all of them were paid by US tax money and European money. So I think all of us need to review and sit down and re-establish a conversation that's built on true value of democracy that we can all stand and defend.
I totally agree. This is why I said be careful, because we have a lot of corruption in the civil society in Tunisia, everywhere. You have to be towards this problem very carefully and to be very I was really very shocked to see a lot of our organizations backing the coup, and this is one of the reasons that I think that the process would be much more complex and long than expected.
Thank you. One quickly, please.
Hi, my name is Shafiqa Al-Gumai, and I'm peace.
Please, I don't have.
Yemeni peace congregations for Yemen, and democratization, of course. How? I thank you, President Marzouki. I follow you all the time. How we can rebuild our people to also come and defend democracy, the new educated people, the educated people, who have a lot of educated people in the whole world, the Arab world, and they are enlightened, and some of them are rich, and they are willing also to create even media, democracy, media for educating for democracy in the Arab world. We need that, and we need to create that. We need to do coalition together. Otherwise, we need to educate people. Otherwise, we cannot do it and leave it as you said. It will take years and years to be done.
Thank you.
We have to do it because we have to make sure that they understand what the dictatorship in the Arab world are doing to the people. They are killing people.
Thank you. One last question, quickly.
Comment.
Or comment, yeah.
There is a component that I would want to ask you about. The military. How was it during your 3 years? And will we ever see a suwar dhahab in our militaries?
Thank you.
It's yes, it's very difficult question. I can assure you that during my presidency, I changed all the military data. I changed them very quickly because I was afraid that we could have a coup like in Egypt. Unfortunately, the military was behind legal and disciplined military in Tunisia, but. I don't know for the moment what's happening because I believe that this guy is still in power because he's backed by the military. But what kind of military are they waiting just for the moment that this guy becomes so unpopular that they can be sure that removing him wouldn't change? But what I don't want is, to have a military coup like in Egypt, because what I would like the military to do is to give up to go back to the constitution of the revolution and to stay away of the political process. But once again, I don't know. We have to wait and to pray. Look, in our Arab states. You have two kinds of Arab states. You have the states who own a military, and you have the other kind of military were owning states. For instance, Algeria is the military having a state. Israel is a military having a state. Egypt is a military having a state. In Tunisia, we still, I hope that a state having a military, but we don't know. We don't know.
Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate your patience and your attendance. Thank you, Dr. Marzouki, for joining us today.
He should be here talking about he's the biggest man in Hollywood.
Yes, I know, but you know, I don't know him personally.
You know?
No.
No, he was talking about you.
Yes, no, I don't know him. He played an important role in the politics in the 80s and the 90s. And now for the moment, I don't know what he's doing.
Because he brought the industry, the century together, like this.
Yes, business.
So you don't know. And what they can do. Tarek's daughter is doing movie stuff in Hollywood. He's going to bypass me as well. I work at analysts. I'm an antitrust reporter, so yeah, financial. You know, you got little
A live picture this morning of the White House briefing room where shortly